Here is a list of 100 political concerns Democrats often raise about Donald Trump. Ethics in government. Alleged interference in investigations, e.g. the Russia investigation. Perceived undermining of democratic institutions. Conflicts of interests with his business dealings. The use of presidential pardons to benefit allies. Handling of classified documents. Refusal to release tax returns while in office, perceived nepotism in appointing family members to advisory roles, hosting political events at Trump properties, allegations of corruption in his administration, resistance to oversight from Congress, encouragement of loyalty to himself over the Constitution, use of executive orders to bypass Congress, allegations of mishandling the Emoluments Clause, perceived disrespect for the rule of law, encouraging baseless election fraud claims, attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, support for overturning Roe v. Wade, criticism of mail-in voting without evidence, politicizing the Department of Justice, questionable handling of COVID-19 relief funds, allegations of using foreign policy for personal political gain, frequent firings and turnover within his administration, overuse of Twitter for official communications, alleged favoritism towards certain political donors, withholding aid to Ukraine allegedly for political leverage, policies and leadership style, focus on tax cuts for the wealthy, policies perceived as anti-environment, withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, attacks on renewable energy initiatives, deregulation of industries at the expense of public safety, immigration policies like family separation at the border, attempts to end DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals, perceived mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic, spread of misinformation during the pandemic, cuts to social safety net programs, efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, harsh rhetoric toward immigrants and refugees, alleged weakening of NATO alliances, favorable rhetoric toward authoritarian leaders, e.g. Vladimir Putin, trade war with China that hurts U.S. farmers, withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, tariffs on allies like Canada and the EU, handling of protests, including the use of tear gas at Lafayette Square, refusal to address systemic racism, comments perceived as inflammatory toward minority communities, reversal of net neutrality protections, opposing minimum wage increases, climate change denial or downplaying its importance, focus on coal and fossil fuel industries over clean energy, efforts to weaken the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, rhetoric and behavior, use of divisive rhetoric, normalizing falsehoods in public discourse, criticizing the media as the enemy of the people, encouraging violence at campaign rallies, mocking political opponents and journalists, downplaying white supremacist violence, spreading conspiracy theories, perceived sexism in statements about women, frequent insults toward political opponents, allegations of racist comments, reluctance to condemn far-right groups unequivocally, perceived endorsement of anti-democratic norms, using inflammatory language about immigrants, calling election processes rigged without evidence, downplaying the severity of the January 6th Capitol attack, hostile rhetoric toward international allies, alleged use of divisive strategies to appeal to his base, downplaying the impact of climate disasters, rhetoric that erodes trust in government institutions, promoting skepticism about science and experts, failing to condemn foreign interference in U.S. elections, encouraging followers to distrust election outcomes, refusal to participate in peaceful transfer of power, use of profane or unpresidential language, attacks on whistleblowers, long-term impact and other concerns, polarization of the political climate, increased mistrust in elections, undermining the CDC and public health agencies, weakening of the State Department, promoting a cult of personality, straining relations with key allies, e.g. Germany, France, focus on loyalty tests within the Republican Party, encouragement of hyperpartisanship, resistance to bipartisan efforts on infrastructure, failure to address gun violence effectively, lack of clear strategy for addressing homelessness, reduced funding for public education, mismanagement of Puerto Rico disaster relief, cuts to scientific research funding, questionable use of military for political purposes, perceived favoritism toward large corporations, blocking refugees from entering the U.S., downplaying Russian election interference, encouraging public distrust of election officials, rolling back LGBTQ+ protections, mismanagement of natural disaster responses, spreading distrust in judicial outcomes, disregard for bipartisan legislative processes, perceived erosion of norms of civility in public discourse, lasting damage to America's international reputation. So those are some of the complaints Democrats have about Donald Trump's politics.